Hello honey pies, I'm Kellyanne and you're watching Tea and Tarot on the Four Queens YouTube channel. I'm going to drink tea and talk about tarot as usual, and today my tea is Lapsang which is like the taste of a campfire. It has all the romance of the campfire. It's actually it's a Chinese infusion that is smoke dried over pine wood, so it tastes really smoky, and sometimes it's just known as smoked tea. It's gorgeous. It's one of my favourites ever. I have it with a little bit of milk and no sugar because I'm sweet enough. Okay, so the topic I've chosen for today is one that's actually really close to my heart. I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea because obviously I don't want to be too biased about the subject, and I don't want to bring too much of my personal issues to it per se. But I've decided to talk about the ending of friendship because I know that's something that a lot of people have been through, and you know it cuts really deep, and there are lots of implications with regard to your emotional well-being and how well you actually heal from something like that. It can be really, really difficult, especially when the friendship was particularly intense or particularly long-lasting. So I kind of just want to talk about tarot with regard to general experiences of friendships ending and my thoughts on some of the messages that might kind of help us to heal and that kind of thing. But I'm hoping that I don't put too much of a personal overtone onto it at all, because that's not what Tea and Tarot was ever supposed to be about. So I'm just going to make a start, and I hope that the messages are going to be helpful to you. I just selected some key cards that for me I feel speak to me strongly about this subject. So with thinking about why friendships may end, or why you may choose to extinguish a friendship, or why a friendship might end without your consent or against your will, but you know you find that it does peter out and that you can't manage to keep hold of it and tie those strings together with it, I selected some cards that I feel might be precursors or triggers for the ending of a friendship and speak to us about how we might deal with those issues and those reasons for a friendship breaking down. The first one I've selected is the Nine of Swords. And this one I think speaks to us of the importance of remembering that a friendship should always bring us more joy than it brings us anguish. And I think this is one that it's important to remember when we've had a friend for a long time, when we've been with them through thick and thin, and when the friendship almost starts to feel like second nature. I think there's a danger quite often that we can feel obligated to continue with a friendship, or that we convince ourselves that we don't know who we'd be without the friendship, or that the friendship has indeed become part of the furniture, if you will. It's very difficult to reassess a friendship like that because we feel like it's part of us, and we feel that we have a duty to continue with it, and we have a duty to keep feeding into it, even when it's giving us nothing in return but misery, paranoia, insecurity, or a feeling of being consistently undervalued. I think long-standing friendships are the most difficult to part from for this reason. I think it becomes... you feel that it's something that's there, that has been there for so long that it should always be there, and that even when it begins to cause you a lot of anguish and a lot of anxiety, or you don't actually feel happy to spend time with that friend anymore, or you feel that you're never listened to or often overlooked, you still don't feel that you have the option to extinguish the friendship. You don't feel that there is a possibility that one day your world and your existence may continue without that friendship, even though it seems like the healthiest thing to do. It's really difficult for us to have that conversation with ourselves, I think, about the fact that a friendship may have become very much counterproductive and not really worth its salt anymore. And it's okay for friendships to go awry. It's okay to realise that they haven't manifested in the way that we would have hoped. They haven't led us into the kind of long-lasting, mutually beneficial territory that we would have wanted, but they have in fact become lopsided, or there's a lack of understanding there, or we've changed, you know, we've just changed as people and it's time to move on. I think it's really difficult with long-standing friendships that have been there for a long time for us to admit that it may be time to move on, and for us to have that conversation with ourselves about the fact that it no longer feels healthy, or it no longer feels joyous, it no longer feels like something that's enriching our lives, but it feels like something that's actually taking out of our lives. And that ties nicely in with the next card that I've chosen, the Three of Swords. The Three of Swords is my favourite tarot card. I think it just speaks to me on so many different levels, and it's also really gorgeous, just aesthetically speaking. The Three of Swords is a big message about communication. And I think following on from that message of communication, the Three of Swords can speak to us about how essential it is that we are able to be true to ourselves, particularly when it comes to the relationships that we keep in our lives which really matter. We need to be able to show people who we truly are. We need to be able to say how we feel and say how we feel about the connections in our lives, state any issues we're having. I think it's very dangerous to remain in a friendship where you cannot be yourself and you cannot speak your mind because you're worried about what the consequences will be, or you feel intimidated by what your friend may say in return. You're scared of the response, you're scared of losing your friend, so you keep quiet about certain things. And this could happen with any number of things that you may need to feel you can openly communicate on. For example, you may feel that your friend has a substance issue. You may feel that your friend is in an unhealthy relationship and you want to help them with that. Or you may feel that your friend is on the wrong path, but you don't know how to impart advice without offending your friend because your friend doesn't normally allow you to get involved in that area of their life. You may feel undervalued, or you may feel that there was a particular incident that upset you and you want to let your friend know, I didn't really like it when you did that, it hurt me. Let me explain the reasons why it hurt me and maybe we can talk about it. If you feel intimidated or you feel that you can't speak up without being rejected in any way, then you have to consider the difference between an acquaintance and a friend, and the difference between a fair weather friend or a friend that you see fairly infrequently when times are good, and a friend that you consider to be a true friend, somebody who picks you up when you're down, somebody who knows when the veneer that you're putting on isn't quite what's going on beneath, one of those friends that you can count on and who can count on you in return. So I think the ability you have to communicate with a friend of yours really speaks highly of whereabouts that friend is placed on the friendship scale, if you see what I mean. And also, I think the Three of Swords is about being vulnerable too. I think the Three of Swords is about giving your heart and giving of who you truly are. And risking that there may be some criticism involved or that you may get your feelings hurt. But that's the nature of any true connection, We have to allow ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable because that is the nature of giving of ourselves. It's the nature of dropping our defences and of being real. I think the Three of Swords speaks very highly of real talk, as we tend to be calling it these days, where we cut the bullshit and we really get down to saying what we think and feel. And yes, it can be very empowering to do that, and you may want to do that with your friend on certain things. You want to speak your mind, you want to say what you really feel out of love, out of nurturing, and you don't want it to be taken the wrong way. But I think with regard to vulnerability, the Three of Swords is also asking us to allow our friends to do that with us. Can our friends tell us what they really feel? Can our friends impart advice without being attacked or dismissed? Are we scared of criticism? Are we scared of being questioned or challenged? Do we allow our friends deep enough into our lives for them to be able to consider us to be true friends, Where are our boundaries? Where are our defences? And are they always necessary, or are we just afraid? The Wheel of Fortune often speaks of cycles, and I think a lot of the time the Wheel of Fortune is thought of as a card that's very much about fate and chance and luck and destiny, but what we forget is that there's a great big wheel in this card, It's about going round and round and round sometimes, so it's not just about taking ourselves off the beaten track and allowing fate to have its way with us. It's also about considering those cycles that we appear to be perpetuating, those cycles that tend to repeat, those things that don't seem to change and don't seem to respond to any external stimuli but seem to keep us trapped or stagnant or become problematic. I mean, it's about positive cycles too, but I think often the Wheel of Fortune can speak to us about negative cycles as well. So I think that with this card can allow us to tap into the idea that we can look out for cycles that perpetuate themselves. If you have a problem within a friendship and it just seems to systematically repeat itself, and it doesn't seem to matter whether you talk about it and sort it out or whether you kind of let it go but you change some variables because you hope it doesn't happen in the future, the cycle still seems to perpetuate itself. Maybe you have a friend who displays selfish behaviour, and maybe you spoke to her about it before and you guys sorted it out and she apologised for being self-serving and she said she was in a bad place. Then about a month and a half later, there's that self-serving, selfish behaviour again. You've noticed it, it's very hurtful. You try and talk to her about it, she apologises profusely, but the cycle continues on. If there's a negative cycle in a friendship and it doesn't seem to change, and you've made you've made a valid point of attempting to change it, you've been sensitive within your attempts to change it, but nothing really seems to move on, and it seems like the friendship is stuck, then it's possible that it only works on that dynamic. And on that dynamic, one or both of you in the friendship are losing out, because you're either feeling undervalued, you're not feeling listened to, you feel like you never get your say and it's always the other friend that decides what should be done. You feel perhaps that your friend is using you and your insecurity to feel better about themselves. Whatever it is, if you've actually noticed that and done your best to open up the channel to discuss it and try and change it, and it still sort of hasn't made any difference, and you still feel like, God, this cycle is going on, then that is a valid reason to decide that the strength and the bond of the connection has been tested. And from that test, you need to decide how to progress forward, because nobody wants to stay stuck on Groundhog Day. And I think when we've done our best to be completely honest, and it's back to that honesty again, and the daring that you need to have to be honest and to speak your piece and to give real talk. If we've given real talk and nothing's really come of it, then we need to consider the fact that the friendship is probably being used to fulfill a certain emotional need, either in ourselves or in the other person involved in the connection. And that when we try and better the friendship and make it more level and make it more balanced and be honest about it, if nothing changes, why is nothing changing? Why is the cycle perpetuating? And is it time to accept that it can only work on that one level, and if it doesn't work on that level, then it doesn't work at all? Basically, it's about allowing the friendship to grow with you, accepting the changes that you go through as a human being. And my mother always says that the friends that you select and the partners that you select are mirrors of yourself at that time. They actually, although it might look very random the way you meet a friend, I met a friend at work, we were working on the same team, or I met this guy at the gym, he was on the running machine next to me, we've been friends ever since. Even though it might look very random the way you actually meet friends in life, it's not as random as you might think, because the friends that you hold on to and the friendships that become more intense are often the result of the fact that the circumstances you're both going through, or the things you're both experiencing, or the area you're in your lives at that time mirror each other. So there's something there with which you can kind of connect, and there's some way that you can bounce off of each other. That's why a lot of friendships don't last forever, because we change, and the reflection in the mirror begins to look different, and we don't always grow at the same rate, in the same way, at the same time, for the same reasons, with the same ambitions. We don't, we move on, we find new friends that mirror us in a new way, to represent the new person we are. And I don't think there's anything disingenuous with that whatsoever. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's one of those things. I think it's the reason that we don't always marry and have children with the first person we hook up with, because we are changing, It's a work in progress. And it's exactly the same with friendships. So I think that we mirror each other for a time. And if we don't give the effort that it takes to grow and allow ourselves and each other to grow differently and still maintain the friendship, then the cycle is just going to continue, People that have been married for 40, 50 years, they have made a distinct effort and a very admirable, commendable effort to allow each other to grow, and to try and grow sort of around each other and twist and tangle around each other. It's difficult. That's why marriages and relationships and friendships break down. But if you feel you want to invest enough that you will allow each other to grow in your own ways and accept that you're not the same person, but you're going to allow for that growth, then it can be done. It can be done, but a lot of the time it can't be done, The friendship has served its purpose for that time in your existence, after which it's very difficult to reconcile it with the changes that you go through in life. And there's actually nothing wrong with admitting that and allowing it to peter out, When it starts to go awry is when you just allow the cycle to perpetuate, and nothing really changes with it. And some friendships can be unhealthy from the get-go. They can exist on a negative cycle from the get-go. And it just depends on when you choose to actually open your eyes and realise that the friendship is actually not healthy for you and that you need to move on. Sometimes friends can be very self-involved and self-serving and not really acknowledge your feelings or your emotions. And the Four of Cups speaks a little bit about this kind of state of self-involvement that we can get ourselves into. And this one's just a very brief idea, but I'm just going to touch on it. There can be times in our lives where selfishness is necessary, and this is something my mother always said to me. she always said that, being selfish is given such a bad press, but it's actually an important thing. As long as you acknowledge that it is time for extreme self-involvement for one period or another in your life where you really need to pull out of the responsibilities you've accepted for anyone else or anything else, you need to go away and you need to be self-involved for a time. That is important. That is how you forge forward. The important thing when you feel you've reached a stage in your life where you need to be selfish and you need to be self-contained or self-involved is that you acknowledge that and you accept it and you communicate it. So if a friend says to you, I'm really sorry I can't be there for you at the moment, but I have a lot going on, I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I will talk about it when I get to the end of that bridge and I feel I'm on the other side, I love you, I'm sorry, I know I wasn't very sort of open and appreciative of what you needed to talk about the other day, but I'm having my own shit. That is somebody who's being accepting and communicative of the need for their own selfishness. Now, obviously, selfishness can't be prolonged. Selfishness can't be a state of being all the time. You wouldn't have anybody in your life anymore. It would be ridiculous. But from time to time, it's important to get into this state of being where we are considering and thinking very, very deeply about our own situation and giving ourselves that time without any outside expectations, without any responsibilities that involve anyone else, without any cooperation per se, but we're giving ourselves that time. Allow your friends that time and expect your friends to allow you that time as well, but communicate it. It's so important to communicate it. And if you feel that there's a friend who is self-serving on a mass scale and is pretty much always under this tree, only thinking of themselves, ignoring what you're giving to them, ignoring what you're bringing to the equation, just thinking about their own situation, then it's time to consider how healthy that friendship is and how the dynamic is actually working for you guys. The King of Swords is a total image of knowing your own mind, having mastery over your own thoughts, deciding what your beliefs and ethics are, deciding where your core lies. It's also about knowledge and intellect, but importantly, it's about self-knowledge too. It's not just about book knowledge, it's about knowledge that comes from here. And this guy has really, really worked on this, he's got it down. The reason that I selected this card for the friendship tea and tarot vlog is that I think sometimes if your beliefs are fundamentally different and your ethics are fundamentally different, if you can't allow yourselves and each other, to get past that fundamental difference, then you are going to have to call it a night. I know that sounds crazy and I know it's kind of a controversial idea, but there are some points at which you guys are only ever going to run parallel to each other and you're not going to be able to accept each other's ways of being. And this happened to me with the friend that I fell away from earlier this year, unfortunately. It came to my attention, and I think it came to hers as well, that we could not get along with our core fundamental beliefs and ethics. And she expected certain things from me that she really ought only to expect it of herself. They were her beliefs, they were her ethics. And she was very, very gung-ho about pushing them onto other people. And she only really wanted people in her life who were on a plane with her on her ethics with regard to veganism and with regard to her kind of spiritual beliefs and her beliefs about money and her beliefs about corruption, etc., etc. So it became very difficult for me to be my own person and follow my own journey, particularly with regard to my diet and changing my politics about eating dairy and things like that, whatever. I'm not going to go into the whole shebang, but basically she was trying to force her beliefs onto me. And sometimes when we have beliefs that are held so strongly, yes, of course, we can have adversarial friendships where we debate and we discuss and we converse and we try and change each other's minds. But those friendships very, very rarely reach that next plateau because we find it difficult to be truly close with people who hold belief systems that we fundamentally abhor or feel completely estranged from. There needs to be a healthy respect for other people's thoughts and feelings and other people's beliefs and ethics, obviously. Other people's standpoints need to come into it. But there comes a point where if we're trying to force our beliefs onto each other, or we're arguing too much to persuade and not enough to be persuaded, that respect will be lost in the ether. And that's a big problem that I see come up with a lot of friendships, where it just seems to me that one or the other are trying to change or mould one or the other, and that eventually, that's not going to go anywhere, and they both kind of realise that. Finally, and just very quickly, the High Priestess is a huge symbol of intuition in tarot. And I think that intuition and allowing your intuition to grow and allowing it to develop and sort of enriching the soil so that it has a great foundation from which to flourish is all about growth, personal growth, spiritual growth, self-development, self-awareness, self-knowledge. If your friendship stops you from engaging in that self-knowledge and that personal growth, if your friendship is making you stagnate in any way, if your friendship is holding you back or making you realise that you're gripping on to the person that you used to be so you can keep this friendship in your life instead of embracing who you now are and accepting that honestly, then you need to figure out how important this friendship is to you and if you're really going to allow it to make you stagnate. And this is such an important point that I'm ending on. It really is, because if a friendship is stopping you from growing and you genuinely realise that in your conscious mind, then you need to do something about it, because friendships should never ever be about making each other stand still. And there's a lot of fear in friendship, you know. There's a lot of fear of the other person changing. People don't want that, particularly not when they've been friends for a long, long time. We want to grasp onto what we had. We don't want people changing. We don't want people bettering their lives if we feel it's going to take them away from us, you know. And that's not love in the best possible sense. That's not friendship in the best possible sense. If you're being held back, then you need to recognise that honestly right now and work out what you're going to do about it, you know. And obviously it all starts with honesty. It all starts with communication, not only with them but with yourself. Thank you for watching Tea and Tarot, and I will see you again for another episode soon, I hope.